Good morning and welcome to University Unitarian Church on this emerging spring Sunday morning, March 21st. A couple announcements before we begin this morning. I am joined here by Aria Curtis, our Education Program Coordinator, Dwight on the piano, and Callie, our soloist, and Byron here on our tech team. It is good to be here together with all of you. A few announcements before we begin. On March 27th at 7 p.m., there's going to be a UUC 60s dance party. It's going to be groovy, I would say. It is part of the celebration of our Giving Month, our Pledge Month, and no registration is required. You can find the Zoom link on the article and the website. Click on the Zoom link and UUC Connect. And I would say that costumes are encouraged. Hope to see you there. Also, this afternoon at 2:30 to 4 o'clock, there will be a panel on Islam and women, and this is being hosted by the Interfaith Justice Team here at UUC, formerly known as the Solidarity with Muslim Communities Team. And this panel will feature Anila Afzali, who's the Executive Director of the Muslim Association of Puget Sound Amen American Muslim Education Network. It will feature her and 6 different Muslim women as the panelists. It should be great. You can find more information on UUC Connect. And also, following Sunday service today, there will be another conversation with the board. And the board is inviting you to come and discuss the eventual transition back into this building and to hear from you what you're feeling and needing to know about this process. As John shared last week, we're going to start making space for groups to meet outside, small groups to meet outside in a socially distanced and masked way. And given that, I also would like to share an announcement from our religious education program, noting that recently the governor announced that public schools in Washington must offer online and in-person options for students in April. However, we do not believe it is yet safe for UUC to offer in-person religious education at this time. We will continue to center the needs of the most vulnerable members of our community in making decisions about reopening. And there'll be more information about this in next week's Gateway. So, welcome to worship this morning. Welcome to University Unitarian Church. It is good to be together. This service this morning has truly been a creation of this community.
Cantore che tiene lungo verso, dalle, beve, grillo, canta, dalle, beve, grillo, canta, el grillo è buon cantore, ma non fa come gli altri uccelli, come li han cantato un poco. Han fatto un altro loco, sempre il grillo sta pulsando, quando la maggiore nel caldo, allora canta sol per amore, per amore.
The church is not a place, it is a people. The church is not only a steeple above the tree lines, streets, and cars. Rather, it is a people proclaiming to the world that we are here for the work of healing and justice. The church is not walls built stone upon stone, held together by mortar. but rather person linked with person linked with person, all ages, all genders, all abilities. A community built on the foundation of reason, faith, and love. The church is not just a set of doors open on Sunday morning, but the commitment day after day and moment after moment of our hearts creaking open the doors of welcome to the possibility of new experiences and radical welcome. The church is not simply a building, a steeple, a pew. The church is the gathering together of all people and experiences and fear and love and hope in our resilient hearts, gathering however we can to say to the world, welcome, come on in, lay down your heartache, and pick up hope and love. For the church is us, each and every one of us, together a beacon of hope to this world that so sorely needs it.
Thank you, Ella, for calling us to worship on this Intergenerational Sunday. As part of our giving campaign, each Sunday this month, we are highlighting some of the ministries of this congregation. And on this morning, we will be lifting up Lake City Partners Ending Homelessness. Our partnership with Lake City Partners Ending Homelessness is in its second year and is part of the Economic Justice Team's activities. Since the winter shelter opened last October, over 50 UUC members and families and the youth group have provided 18 dinners and 20 breakfasts for guests at the shelter. We also donated $9,500 from our holiday offerings to support their new shelter, which will be opening soon. This shelter will provide round-the-clock shelter for vulnerable people with wraparound services. And so our video this morning will share more information about how our community partnership and connections with each other at UUC have been nurtured in this past year.
UUC has a long history of supporting housing for individuals. I think maybe it started with the AIDS housing and the AIDS crisis in the 80s. There was refugee housing. Then there was housing for people struggling with mental illness. Lots of supported housing, a commitment and project. Homelessness fits in with that mission, I feel.
Lake City Partners is a nonprofit organization that grew out of a community task force of people from local businesses, community organizations, churches, concerned citizens who are concerned about the problems of homelessness in Lake City. People can come in the evening and have a hot dinner, a safe, warm, dry place to sleep, a cold breakfast to take with them when they leave in the morning, and the opportunity for compassionate listening. It relies on the volunteer efforts of a whole network of other churches and community organizations and businesses. I like the idea of UUC being part of this bigger partnership to serve our community. I mean, our church is just a couple miles down 35th Avenue Northeast from the heart of Lake City. So it's our community.
When we call for people to join in with us to help, we just get enormous response of wonderful people who just want to jump in and help. And it's a different way to be with our community that I find really gratifying and just reinforces for me how I love this community and how wonderful it is to be a member of a community that you can work with to make a larger impact.
We've actually had some teenagers who wanted to go do the shopping, do the cooking, and do the delivery.
This is one way that's really concrete, and it's both helpful for the community and helpful for us, keeping our connection during this time where we have the opportunity to feel disconnected.
And since we can't go to church and rub shoulders with all these people, before and after services, it's like this opportunity this year is something I've really hung on to as a way to make new friends.
Not only do we believe in understanding the world, but we believe in acting in the world, and acting in the world around our church, in our own neighborhood. What better way of action is there than that?
We are in the midst of this community of people living homeless, and it just reinforces the sense that we're all part of humanity living in this world together. And I think that's something that's really important to everybody at UUC, and we're doing what we can.
And I think it's actually important as a religious community, be part of this group of different diverse religions working on this really important crisis. I've been going to UUC for 30 years, and was Peter Rabel saying at the end of many of the services, and I paraphrase this, let it be through our deed rather than our word that we express our religion. And to me, that has always been the compelling message to me from UUC.
When we make a pledge to support UUC, we are making a pledge to support the totality of all the programming that UUC offers. The Sunday services, the music, the pastoral counseling, the whole variety of volunteer opportunities. When I make a contribution to the church, I'm saying, I'm supporting all of this.
The community I have at UUC, I just really treasure, because when I'm with them, whether it be in social justice, whether it be in the Lake City homelessness, whether it be on Sundays, there's a sense of we're all in this to make a better world. It's also for the next generation. We benefit, we sit on other people's shoulders. You know, I come into this church and it's already there and it's robust and it offers me so much. And I feel a responsibility to offer that going forward.
I think we all have bring a certain passion to this whole thing that goes well beyond, just serving up lasagna.
Would you please join now in singing our Doxology, followed by hymn number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. Good morning, Aria.
Good morning, Beth. It's good to be with you.
It's good to be with you, too.
So last week, you and John talked a little bit about the anniversary of online church, and it made me think about what that first Sunday was like. We hadn't realized yet that this would be longer term, and I remember us being so focused on managing that short term, we just got to get through this feeling. I don't think it was until May that we started thinking about online church in the long term.
Yeah. You know, I remember when we started live streaming worship from this sanctuary, it was really strange, and it was even sad to speak to an empty room. And so I would imagine the faces and the smiles of UUC members before worship would begin, to remind myself of that we are all still connected. And a year later, and I still do this each and every Sunday.
You're right. That totally works. Beth, you know that I love rituals, and this anniversary seems like an important one. What ritual has been helpful to you this year?
You know, we do a lot of rituals here at UUC. Weddings, memorials, and child dedications are all rituals, and whenever we light the chalice, that is part of our ritual of entering into sacred time together as Unitarian Universalist. And for me, I also love rituals, and rituals help me to slow down and feel part of something larger. One of the rituals I've practiced over this past year has been during our Wednesday Vespers, an evening service, and for each Vesper service, I set up an altar in my living room and cover it with candles like this one.
Oh,
And people will join Vespers over Zoom, and they will share their joys and sorrows, gratitudes, and prayers into the chat. And I light a candle for each thing that is shared. And at the end, all of the small lights come together to make an altar of light and warmth. And this reminds me that in our joys and our sorrows, even in this time, maybe particularly in this time, we are not alone.
That's beautiful. It really reminds me of our Joys and Sorrows tradition in Children's Chapel that we do each Sunday. So this is how I have marked our year of pandemic life. This is my memory book. The act of remembering can be really challenging sometimes. Remembering can make us feel really sad, but it's okay to be sad. It's also okay to look back at all these pictures and feel joy. There were lots of ways that we chose to get creative and to have fun together, even though we couldn't be in the same physical space. And that is really worth celebrating. I love the phrase, name the feeling to tame the feeling. Feelings like sadness can feel really big and overwhelming, and they can be difficult to talk about. But creating something like a memory book can help us name and tame our big feelings. It also helps us honor this year. These were important events that are worth remembering. And putting together a memory book is honestly a very slow process. And that helped me be really mindful about what I was creating.
I think Melody has another grief ritual to share with us, right?
Yeah, she does. Melody likes to mark these kinds of anniversaries through a contemplative walk. She's recorded a video to share this practice with us. Let's watch that now.
Hi, friends. I'm going to take you with me on my daily 20-minute walk up and down a hill in the Fremont neighborhood of Seattle through sharing photographs. I am marking the year-long anniversary of the COVID-19 pandemic through walking. When I need to celebrate a hard anniversary or try to make sense of something that happened, I naturally do it through the practice of contemplative walking. On this walk, My destination or goal is a tree at the top of a hill. In a contemplative walk, you let the journey to a destination and then home again transform you. If you're journeying to mark the anniversary of the pandemic, once you get to your destination, take time to think about the impact of the pandemic on your life and the lives of those around you. Really feel all the hard feelings the pandemic brings up. Or think about how strong you, your family, and friends are. You made it through this really hard year. On walks, I try to notice things that are beautiful or unusual. There are small treasures everywhere. On this walk, I found a graphic novel by Lucy Knisley. I laughed when I found it because it's a book about traveling, and I needed to cancel all of my travel plans last March. On my walk, I also found a pirate flag, murals, hopscotch art on the street, and even a socially distanced outdoor jazz band playing on a porch, seen here. Walking is a form of spiritual practice in many traditions. Buddhists practice walking meditations, Muslims go on pilgrimage to Mecca, and some Christians and pagans walk labyrinths. People who are not able to walk physically can also participate in contemplative journeys. I remember when the pandemic started, people put shamrocks in their windows for St. Patrick's Day, so kids could hunt for shamrocks while going on walks. After that, the shamrocks were exchanged for teddy bears in people's windows. One house on my route last April organized a socially distanced outdoor collaborative art project for the neighborhood on April 22nd, or Earth Day. Here are some of the creations that people made for that project. I've gone on this walk at least every other day over the last year. I know that there are a lot of other people who go on the same route. Even if we can't see each other, I know that those other people are there with me, and we are all connected together.
What another beautiful way of marking this anniversary of doing online church.
Yeah. Melody's walk reminds me of a book I read recently called The Invisible Web by Patrice Karst. Patrice writes about an invisible strings that connects our hearts to the people we care about. We each have invisible strings that connect our hearts and one that connects with Melody's heart and to the hearts of all our friends and loved ones. Our invisible strings help us feel close to one another, even when we are apart. When I think about our church, I imagine all of our strings, and I picture what a great, big, beautiful web that makes. Our web has helped us get through this year, and it makes me feel so proud that we have taken such good care of our web this year.
Yeah, that's right. I wonder what ways families of UUC are recognizing this 1 year anniversary. You know, I hope you all find ways to slow down and remember and feel yourself being held by what you experience as holy. Thank you, Aria, for this story time. This time for all ages. And thank you, Melody. At this point in our service, we gratefully receive the morning offering. Would you please join me in speaking the words we say each week? This church is a community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. When we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm our lives within it.
Would you please join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation? We hold in our hearts the victims of the shooting this past week in Georgia, and we pray for an end to violence against Asian and Pacific Islander communities. Spirit of life, who draws us together in a web of holy relationships, make your presence known with us and in us and among us. Remind us that we are not alone in history. Ignite us with the courage of the living tradition. Remind us that we are not alone in entering the future, and anchor us with patience and perseverance. Remind us that we are not alone in our times of grief and pain. Comfort us with your Spirit. Manifest in human hands and voices. Remind us that we are not alone in joy and wonder. Inspire us to honor and extend the beauty we find in this world. Divine music of the universe, let our hearts beat in diverse and harmonious rhythms, cooperating with an everlasting dance of love. May we move with the rhythms of peace. May we move with the rhythms of compassion. May we move with the rhythms of justice. Source of stars and planets and water and land, open our hearts to all of our neighbors. Open our souls to a renewal of faith. Open our hands to join together in the work ahead. To these words, I invite you to add the silent prayers and longings of your heart. So be it. Blessed be, and amen. We'll be singing a new hymn this morning, one that some of you might already know. It's Loosen, Loosen by Ali Halpert. Ali is a young adult, queer, Jewish activist and musician who writes songs for building community and visioning different worlds. Please join now in singing this song of healing.
Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the and holy name. Will you ease this pain? Loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go.
That really moved my heart. Thank you. As the story was told to me, the villagers, wary of outsiders, had already hidden their food by the time the 3 hungry strangers came to town hoping for a hot meal and a place to sleep. As the 3 strangers entered into the village, I imagine the townspeople peering through shuttered windows and cracked doors, watching as the 3 outsiders went door to door only to be turned away. It must have been strange indeed to hear one of these outsiders declare that since the village had no food to spare, the 3 of them would make stone soup. Stone soup. Have you heard of such a thing? I mean, this must have been intriguing, for the villagers began to gather round those 3 strangers, curious to see about a soup made out of stones. They helped build a fire under a large pot of water into which 3 smooth stones were dropped. The soup began to simmer, and one of the strangers tasted it and said, this soup is already delicious, but it would be so much better with some salt and pepper and maybe some herbs. 2 children ran to get spices from their kitchen and added them into the soup. Another one of the strangers took a turn and tasted the soup and said, but you know what? You know what this stone soup really calls for is some carrots and cabbage. And so, carrots and cabbage were procured from their hiding places and added to the pot. If you are familiar with this story, if you've also had this story told to you, you know that the strangers kept sharing what would make this soup more delicious, and the villagers kept bringing more and more ingredients from hiding to share. Celery, onions, potatoes, beef, adding each to the giant soup pot. Eventually, without being fully aware of what they were doing, they created a delicious soup together, a feast that was shared between the villagers and the strangers who in the process had become respected friends. This folk tale of stone soup has been told for over 3 centuries at least, and it has appeared in numerous versions and in different cultures, sometimes being about nail soup, button soup, or even axe soup. And it's lovable, really, in its familiarity. It is a fairly straightforward tale about the importance of sharing and hospitality, with the added delight of a clever trick and the rare ending in which everyone wins. It's a tasty little morsel of a folktale on its own, but do you know what would make it even more delicious? Character analysis. and a dash of ethical questioning. I personally have found myself fascinated by the villagers in this story, the ones who preemptively made the choice to hide their food and to refuse rest to wary strangers. I wonder, what were they afraid of? What had they been taught about outsiders or foreigners? What motivated them to decide as a whole village to deny hospitality? And what would have happened, do you think, in the story if just one person had broken with the norms, if only one person had chosen generosity over scarcity? I'm curious about the villagers because I recognize their fear and hesitancy within myself. Each day in this city of abundance, there are thousands who are hungry and homeless. And each day I am confronted with the question of how will I treat the stranger, my community members who exist outside of the norms of society and sleep outside, the people who fall between the cracks of our thin safety net. As I move about my days, what are the stories that I carry about who belongs and who doesn't? There are serious moral and ethical questions that arise from the situation of affirming the inherent worth and dignity of every individual while living in the middle of a society that is so often dehumanizing. And then, of course, there are the strangers in the story, sometimes appearing as crafty beggars or as hungry soldiers. They are people between lands and vulnerable to the perceptions of others. I wonder, what was their story before arriving, hungry, to the village? Why were they away from their homeland? And what were they in search of? I am thinking now of the child migrants in limbo at our southern border, and of the immigrants who are never afforded belonging in this country because of their race and nationality. I'm curious also, when you have been the stranger, and how did people respond to you? Do you have stories of rejection? Do you have stories of radical welcome? The confrontation of the villagers and the strangers is all too familiar. It happens in our neighborhoods, in our political and economic systems, and on our national borders. And it also happens in this community as we navigate how will we as a church welcome new people, and how to widen the circle beyond the established and the known, beyond the comfortable. It raises the questions of, what do we owe one another as persons and as a people? And what are the limits of these moral obligations? And if all of life is truly connected, then how shall we live? As we begin to return to one another in community, having had a collective experience of a pandemic that impacted people very differently based on their identities and life circumstance, I believe these questions of belonging, obligation, and mutual care are not existential so much as essential. What will be the next chapter in this story? Now we're cooking. The flavors in this story are really starting to mingle. But you know what I think it calls for? a handful of hard-earned wisdom on community, and I know many of you could offer that. As I mentioned, before the strangers had even arrived, the villagers in the story had decided to hide their food. This not only says something about the mindset of the villagers towards outsiders, it points to the frayed relationships with each other as well. In his book, Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam describes the erosion of social capital since the 1950s through tracking the decline in civic and religious involvement, voter turnout, and engagement in member associations. Social capital, he defines as widespread relatedness, and it refers to our social networks, our in-person social networks, our norms of reciprocity, mutual assistance, and trustworthiness. It is about acting on and valuing our interdependence and sense of belonging. And social capital, this can be measured to the extent that we extend hospitality and affection to one another. Based on studying a number of towns in different countries, Putnam, the author, discovered what distinguished more successful towns from less successful towns. It was not geography, history, or financial resources. What distinguished the more successful towns was the extent of social capital. Social networks, he found, have real value, both for the people in those networks, as well as for bystanders. This past year has certainly exposed the frayed relationships with one another in our societies and in our communities, as well as highlighted the profound, life-saving importance of family, friends, and community bonds. For those who are watching today, I wonder, what have you learned about your relationships this past year? And what do you long for in connection with others? Being deeply embedded in this religious community certainly quelled my own feelings of isolation during the lockdowns, and for this I am ever grateful. There has been a feeling of togetherness throughout this past year that has been fortifying, and the meaning-making and mutual care within small groups has been essential. And I also know that tending to the fabric of our connections and building our social capital has faced enormous challenges in the pandemic, and the barriers to sustaining connection have been great. When it is safe to do so, we will begin to return to in-person gatherings. And at the same time, we will be maintaining our online community, drawing a wider circle of engagement to include those of us who have found meaning in this community from a distance. The bounds of our community and the reach of our connections are expanding. And this transition holds great potential and also great challenge and big questions for how we will sustain and reimagine our networks of interrelatedness, how we will deepen trust and expand the sense of belonging outside of these walls. If you think, when you hear the story of Stone Soup, you might be more like one of the villagers in the story. You might be one of the ones already embedded in community. May you, and may we, aspire to be more like the villagers post the miracle of Stone Soup. The ones at the feast, the ones breaking bread with strangers, the ones bringing gifts to share in a cultural move from scarcity to abundance, from isolation to interrelatedness, knowing how much richer the story is when we come together, affirming what Frederick Buchner said when he wrote, "You can survive on your own. You can grow strong on your own. You can prevail on your own. But you cannot become human on your own." Gather round now, close enough to feel the warmth of this story, for it is time to season this tale with our own stories and to peer into the plot, seeking reflection. Remember in the end of the story how the soup came together, composed of the offerings of a whole community and stirred by the cleverness of the strangers? A great feast was created, not only of food, but of friendship. There is a quote, it's a misquote, truth be told, of Aristotle, but wise nonetheless. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The whole of the community and of the stone soup was more than the sum of its disparate parts, more than cabbage and carrots and broth. Because of this synergy that was created in the process, the soup ended up meaning more than a bowl of warm food. University Unitarian has long had ministries to share meals with people who are houseless. Members of all ages have prepared meals for homeless teens in the U District for over a decade in partnership with Teen Feed. And over the past 2 years, as we heard, members of this community have joined together in preparing meals for homeless neighbors as part of our partnership with Lake City Partners. Since it has not been possible to cook these meals as a group this past year, individual households have prepared different sides. One person in charge of the cookies, one person in charge of the main dish, one person in charge of sides, and then brought them together to make one whole meal to share. The significance in these meals is more than a bowl of warm food, no matter how fundamental that is in itself. Creating and sharing these meals is also a recognition of our interdependence. It's a valuing of it and an honoring of the humanity of people in our community who are suffering. This is an act of neighborly love. When members of this community offer their gifts, be that teaching RE, singing in the choir, leading a team, participating in a justice team, financially supporting the congregation, or holding healing space for one another, there is a synergy that is created, an abundance that far exceeds what any one person could do alone. May it be more by deed than word that we express our religion. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I think that this story soup is almost ready. It's almost ready. But you know what makes any story and any meal even better? A good helping of love. Did the villagers and the strangers love one another by the end of the story? It's hard to tell, really, but I do believe that love was present at that feast. And I'm talking about capital L love, agape love, as the Greeks knew it, unconditional and originating in God's love. A greater love that runs through and holds all of life. A love that exists alongside brokenness and has the power to bridge divisions. The denial of this love is what allowed the disconnection at the beginning of the story. In the presence of this love, transformed all who touched it by the end of the telling. Agape love has been working in its alchemy and community for millennia, and it continues to courageously transform. We've seen it many times this last year in this community and beyond, in the mutual care networks, in the showing up and supporting one another. Join and shine love upon this broken and beautiful world. So our soup story is now ready. So let me close with a grace by Celtic theologian John Philip Newell. We live in a moment of grace. Through the hedges of our divisions, we are beginning to glimpse again the beauty of life's oneness. We are beginning to hear in a way that humanity has never heard before the essential harmony that lies at the heart of the universe. We are beginning to understand, amidst the horror and the suffering of our divisions, that we will be well to the extent that we move back into relationship with one another, whether as individuals and families or as nations and species. The time is right. The time is desperately right. And it is only love that has the power to reawaken what has been paralyzed in our hearts. Amen. And let's eat. Would you please join now in singing hymn number 317, We Are Not Our Own. It's been such a joy to be with you all this morning. John will be returning to the pulpit next week, and I will be taking a couple of Sundays off to rest and renew in the wake of this 1-year anniversary. I close with these words from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. We are one, after all, you and I. Together we suffer, together exist, and forever will recreate each other.